Hello, and back again, and welcome. Today's reading, we're going to do something from Buddhism, a Buddhist text, and what I have here are the collected teachings of Ajahn Chah, and this is volume one. It's a 3-volume set. Ajahn Chah was born in, I think, in 1918. He died in 1992, I believe. January 1992, age 73. He was a Thai Buddhist monk, and he was primarily responsible. He was of the type of Buddhist that he was a of the Thai forest tradition, and he was primarily responsible for bringing Theravada Buddhism to the West in the I think the early 60s. He started in England first, and then Thai Buddhism, then Theravada Buddhism, then spread throughout Europe and then the United States and around the world outside of Asia. So I'll just show you a photograph of this is Ajahn Chah, very serious looking chap there, so you get a better shot of him. That's Ajahn Chah, and this is one of his first texts. So I like reading this guy. He's pretty good, and I've always been very interested in Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy. So the beginning of this book, there's a lot of stuff in here about Buddhism in general, the usual stuff, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, for those of you who are familiar with Buddhism, and some of the basic concepts in it. And they talks a lot here about the Thai forest tradition that Ajahn Chah was responsible for. Then there's a lot of stuff here on his, here's something here on the Four Noble Truths, the law of karma. That karma is Pali. In Sanskrit, that would be karma, the word we're more familiar with in the West. Karma, and then here's one here, chapter here, everything is uncertain, right view and virtue, choice of expression, yes or no, methods of training, the teaching of laity, blah, blah. He's got the humor of Ajahn Chah, his last years. Not sure entirely what he died from. I think it was diabetes, actually, that got him at the end. And then there's a whole note on the text. And then finally we get into the text itself, chapter 1. So I'll read for about 35 minutes or so, see how we get on with this. And anyway, here we go. Chapter 1, the middle way within. The teaching of Buddhism is about giving up evil and practicing good. Then, when evil is given up and goodness is established, we must let go of both good and evil. We have already heard enough about wholesome and unwholesome conditions to understand something about them, so I would like to talk about the middle way, that is, the path to transcend both of those things. All the Dhamma talks and teachings. Dhamma, by the way, is a Pali word again, translated into Sanskrit is Dharma, the word we're more familiar with in the West here, Dharma, which really means teaching. Just a Dhamma talk or a Dharma talk is just a teaching talk. All the Dhamma talks and teachings of the Buddha have one aim, to show the way out of suffering to those who have not yet escaped. The teachings are for the purpose of giving us the right understanding. If we don't understand rightly, then we can't arrive at peace. When all the Buddhas became enlightened and gave their first teachings, they pointed out these two extremes, indulgence in pleasure and indulgence in pain. These two types of infatuation are the opposite poles between which those who indulge in the sense pleasures must fluctuate, never arriving at peace. They are the paths which spin around in samsara. The enlightened one observed that all beings are stuck in these two extremes, never seeing the middle way of Dhamma. So he pointed them out in order to show the penalty involved in both. Because we are still stuck, because we are still wanting, we live repeatedly under their sway. The Buddha declared that these two ways are the ways of intoxication. They are not the ways of a mediator, not the ways to peace. These ways are indulgence in pleasure and indulgence in pain, or to put it simply, the way of slackness and the way of tension. If you investigate within, moment by moment, you will see that the tense way is anger, the way of sorrow. Going this way, there is only difficulty and distress. If you have transcended indulgence in pleasure, it means you have transcended happiness. Happiness and unhappiness are not peaceful states. The Buddha taught to let us let go of both of them. This is right practice. This is the middle way. These words, the middle way, do not refer to our body and speech. They refer to the mind. When a mental impression which we don't like arises, it affects the mind and there is confusion. When the mind is confused, then it's shaken up. This is not the right way. When a mental impression arises which we like, the mind goes to indulgence and pleasure. That's not the way either. We people don't want suffering, we want happiness. But in fact, happiness is just a refined form of suffering. Suffering itself is the coarse form. You can compare it to a snake. The head of the snake is unhappiness. The tail of the snake is happiness. The head of the snake is really dangerous. It has poisonous fangs. If you touch it, the snake will bite straight away. But never mind the head. Even if you go to hold onto the tail, it will turn around and bite you just the same, because both the head and the tail belong to the one snake. In the same way, both happiness and unhappiness, or pleasure and sadness, arise from the same parent, wanting. So when you're happy, the mind isn't peaceful. It really isn't. For instance, when we get things we like, such as wealth, prestige, praise, or happiness, we become pleased as a result. But the mind still harbors some uneasiness because we're afraid of losing it. That very fear isn't a peaceful state. Later on, we may actually lose that thing, and then we really suffer. Thus, if you aren't aware, even if you're happy, suffering is imminent. It's just the same as grabbing the snake's tail. If you don't let it go, it will bite. So whether it's the snake's tail or its head, that is, wholesome or unwholesome conditions, they're all just characteristics of the wheel of existence, of endless change. The Buddha established morality, concentration, and wisdom as the path to peace, the way to enlightenment. But in truth, these things are not the essence of Buddhism. They are merely the path. The Buddha called them magga, which means path. The essence of Buddhism is peace, and that peace arises from truly knowing the nature of all things. If we investigate closely, we can see that peace is neither happiness nor unhappiness. Neither of these is the truth. The human mind, the mind which the Buddha exhorted us to know and investigate, is something we can only know by its activity. The true original mind has nothing to measure it by. There is nothing you can know it by. In its natural state, it is unshaken, unmoving. When happiness arises, all that happens is that the mind gets lost in a mental impression. There is movement. When the mind moves like this, clinging and attachment to those things comes into being. The Buddha has already laid down the path of practice in its entirety, but we have not yet practiced, or if we have, we've practiced only in speech. Our minds and our speech are not yet in harmony. We just indulge in empty talk. But the basis of Buddhism is not something that can be talked about or guessed at. The real basis of Buddhism is full knowledge of the truth of reality. If one knows this truth, then no teaching is necessary. If one doesn't know, even if he listens to the teaching, he doesn't really hear. This is why the Buddha said, "The enlightened one only points the way. He can't do the practice for you, because the truth is something you cannot put into words or give away." All the teachings are merely similes and comparisons, means to help the mind to see the truth. If we haven't seen the truth, we must suffer. For example, we commonly use the term sankhara, which referring to the body. Anybody can say it, but in fact we have problems simply because we don't know the truth of these sankhara, and thus cling to them. Because we don't know the truth of the body, we suffer. Here's an example. Suppose one morning you're walking to work and a man yells abuse and insults at you from across the street. And as soon as you hear this abuse, your mind changes from its usual state. You don't feel so good, you feel angry and hurt. That man walks around abusing you day and night. Whenever you hear the abuse, you get angry. And even when you return home, you're still angry because you feel vindictive. You want to get even. A few days later, another man comes to your house and calls out, "Hey, that man who abused you the other day, he's mad, he's crazy." Has been for years. He abuses everybody like that. Nobody takes any notice of anything he says. As soon as you hear this, you're suddenly relieved. That anger and hurt that you've pent up within you all these days melts away completely. Why? Because you know the truth of the matter now. Before you didn't know. You thought that man was normal, so you were angry at him. Thinking like that caused you to suffer. As soon as you find out the truth, everything changes. Oh, he's mad. That explains everything. When you understand this, you feel fine because you know for yourself. Having known then, you can let go. If you don't know the truth, you cling right there. When you thought that man who abused you was normal, you could have killed him. But when you find out the truth that he's mad, you feel much better. This is knowledge of the truth. Someone who sees the Dhamma has a similar experience. When attachment, aversion, and delusion appear, they disappear in the same way. As long as we don't know these things, we think, what can I do? I have so much greed and aversion. This is not clear knowledge. It's just the same as when we thought the madman was sane. When we finally see that he was mad all along, we are relieved of worry. No one could show you this. Only when the mind sees for itself can it uproot and relinquish attachment. It's the same with this body which we call sankhara. Although the Buddha has already explained that the body is not substantial or a real being as such, we still don't agree. We stubbornly cling to it. If the body could talk, it would be telling us all day long, "You're not my owner, you know." Actually, it's telling us all the time, but it's Dhamma language, so we're unable to understand it. For instance, the sense organs of eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body are continually changing, but I've never seen them ask permission from us even once. Like when we have a headache or a stomach ache, the body never asks permission first. It just goes right ahead, following its natural course. This shows that the body doesn't allow anyone to be its owner. It doesn't have an owner. The Buddha described it as an object void of substance. We don't understand the Dhamma, and so we don't understand these sankhara. We take them to be ourselves, as belonging to us or belonging to others. This gives rise to clinging. When clinging arises, becoming follows. Once becoming arises, then there is birth. Once there is birth, then old age, sickness, death, the whole mass of suffering arises. This is the paticcasamuppada. We say ignorance gives rise to volitional activities. They give rise to consciousness and so on. All these things are simply events in the mind. When we come into contact with something we don't like, even if we don't have mindfulness, ignorance is there. Suffering arises straight away. But the mind passes through these changes so rapidly that we can't keep up with them. It's the same as when you fall from a tree. Before you know it, thud, you've hit the ground. Actually, you've passed many branches and twigs on the way, but you couldn't count them. You couldn't remember them as you passed them. You just fall and then thud. That big word again, is the same as this. If we divide it up as it is in the scriptures, we say ignorance gives rise to volitional activities. Volitional activities give rise to consciousness. Consciousness gives rise to mind and matter. Mind and matter give rise to the six sense bases. The six sense bases give rise to sense contact. Contact gives rise to feeling. Feeling gives rise to wanting. Wanting gives rise to clinging. Clinging gives rise to becoming. Becoming gives rise to birth. Birth gives rise to old age, sickness, death, and all forms of sorrow. But in truth, when you come into contact with something you don't like, there's immediate suffering. That feeling of suffering is actually the result of the whole chain of the paticcasamuppada. This is why the Buddha exhorted his disciples to investigate and know fully their own minds. When people are born into the world, they are without names. Once born, we name them. This is convention. We give people names for the sake of convenience to call each other by. The scriptures are the same. We separate everything with labels to make studying the reality convenient. In the same way, all things are simply sankhara. Their original nature is merely that of compounded things. The Buddha said that they are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. They are unstable. We don't understand this firmly. Our understanding is not straight, and so we have the wrong view. This wrong view is that the Sankhara are ourselves. We are the Sankhara, or that happiness and unhappiness are ourselves. We are happiness and unhappiness. Seeing like this is not full, clear knowledge of the true nature of things. The truth is that we can't force all these things to follow our desires. They follow the way of nature. Here is a simple comparison. Suppose you go and sit in the middle of a freeway with the cars and trucks charging down at you. You can't get angry at the car shouting, "Don't drive over here, don't drive over here." It's a freeway. You can't tell them that, so what can you do? You get off the road. The road is the place where the cars run. If you don't want the cars to be there, you suffer. It's the same way with Sankhara, the way they disturb us. Like when we sit in meditation and hear a sound, we think, "Oh, that sound's bothering me." If we understood that sound that bothers us, then we suffer accordingly. If we investigate a little deeper, we'll see that it is we who go out and disturb the sound. The sound is simply sound. If we understand like this, then there is nothing more to it. We leave it be. We see the sound as one thing, we are another. One who understands that the sound comes to disturb him is one who doesn't see himself. He really doesn't. Once you see yourself and then you're at ease, the sound is just sound. Why should you go and grab it? You see that actually it was you who went out and disturbed the sound. Like right now, you may be able to hear those magpies that are outside for the last 10 minutes that are disturbing me. So I just need to ignore them. The sound is the sound. The magpies are the magpies. Pardon me. This is real knowledge of the truth. You see both sides, so you have peace. If you see only one side, there is suffering. Once you see both sides, then you follow the middle way. This is the right practice of the mind. This is what we call straightening out our understanding. In the same way, the nature of all Sankhara is impermanence and death, but we want to grab them. We carry them about and covet them. We want them to be true. We want to find truth within the things that aren't true. Whenever someone sees like this and clings to the Sankhara as being himself, he suffers. The practice of Dhamma is not dependent on being a monk, a novice or layman. It depends on straightening out your understanding. If our understanding is correct, we arrive at peace. Whether you are ordained or not, it's the same. Every person has the chance to practice Dhamma, to contemplate it. We all contemplate the same thing. If you attain peace, it's all the same peace. It's the same path with the same methods. Therefore, the Buddha didn't discriminate between laymen and monks. He taught all people to practice in order to know the truth of the Sankhara. When we know this truth, we let them go. If we know the truth, there will be no more becoming or birth. How is there no more birth? There is no way for birth to take place because we fully know the truth of Sankhara. If we fully know the truth, then there is peace. Having or not having, it's all the same. Gain and loss are one. The Buddha taught us to know this. This is peace. Peace from happiness, unhappiness, gladness and sorrow. We must see that there is no reason to be born. Born in what way? Born into gladness? When we get something we like, we are glad over it. If there's no clinging to that gladness, there is no birth. If there is clinging, this is called birth. So if we get something, we aren't born into gladness. If we lose something, we aren't born into sorrow. This is the birthless and the deathless. Birth and death are both found in clinging to and cherishing the Sankhara. So the Buddha said, "There is no more becoming for me. Finished is the holy life. This is my last birth." There. He knew the birthless and the deathless. This is what the Buddha constantly exhorted his disciples to know. This is the right practice. If you don't reach it, if you don't reach the middle way, then you won't transcend suffering. Chapter 2. The Peace Beyond. It's of great importance that we practice the Dhamma. If we don't practice, then all our knowledge is only superficial knowledge, just the outer shell of it. It's as if we have some sort of fruit, but we haven't eaten it yet. Even though we have that fruit in our hand, we get no benefit from it. Only through the actual eating of the fruit will we really know its taste. The Buddha didn't praise those who merely believe others. He praised the person who knows within himself. Just as with that fruit, if we have tasted it already, we don't have to ask anyone else if it is sweet or sour. our problems are over. Why are they over? Because we see according to the truth. One who has realized the Dhamma is like one who has realized the sweetness or sourness of the fruit. All doubts are ended right there. When we talk about Dhamma, although we may say a lot, it can actually be brought down to 4 things. They are simply to know suffering, to know the cause of suffering, to know the end of suffering, and to know the path of practice leading to the end of suffering. This is all there is. All that we have experienced in the path of practice so far comes down to these 4 things. When we know these things, our problems are over. Where are these 4 things born? They are born just within the body and mind, nowhere else. So why is the teaching of the Buddha so detailed and extensive? This is in order to explain these things in a more refined way, to help us to see them. When Siddhartha Gautama was born into the world, before he saw the Dhamma, he was an ordinary person just like us. When he knew what he had to know, that is, the truth of suffering, the cause, the end and the way leading to the end of suffering, he realized the Dhamma and became a perfectly enlightened Buddha. When we realize the Dhamma, wherever we sit, we know Dhamma. Wherever we hear the Buddha's teaching. When we understand Dhamma, the Buddha is within our mind, the Dhamma is within our mind, and the practice leading to wisdom is within our own mind. Having the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha within our own mind means that whenever our actions are good or bad, we know clearly for ourselves their true nature. That is how the Buddha discarded worldly opinions, praise and criticism. When people praised or criticized him, he just accepted it for what it was. These 2 things are simply worldly conditions, so he wasn't shaken by them. Why not? Because he knew suffering. He knew that if he believed in that praise or criticism, they would cause him to suffer. When suffering arises, it agitates us. We feel ill at ease. What is the cause of that suffering? Is it because we don't know the truth? This is the cause. When the cause is present, then suffering arises. Once arisen, we don't know how to stop it. The more we try to stop it, the more it comes on. We say, don't criticize me, or don't blame me. Trying to stop it like this, suffering really comes on. It won't stop. So the Buddha taught that the way leading to the end of suffering is to make the Dhamma arise as a reality within our own minds. We become those who witness the Dhamma for themselves. If someone says we are good, we don't get lost in it. If they say we are no good, we don't forget ourselves. This way we can be free. Good and evil are just worldly dhammas. They are just states of mind. If we follow them, our mind becomes the world. We just grope in the darkness and don't know the way out. If it is like this, then, we have not yet mastered ourselves. We try to defeat others, but in doing so, we only defeat ourselves. But if we have mastery over ourselves, then we have mastery over all mental formations, sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and bodily feelings. Now I'm talking about externals. They're like that, but the outside is reflected inside also. Some people only know the outside. They don't know the inside. Like when we say to see the body as the body, having seen the outer body is not enough. We must know the body within the body. Then, having investigated the mind, we should know the mind within the mind. Why should we investigate the body? What is this body in the body? When we say to know the mind, what is this mind? If we don't know the mind, then we don't know the things within the mind. This is to be someone who doesn't know suffering, doesn't know the cause, doesn't know the end, and doesn't know the way leading to the end of suffering. The things which should help to extinguish suffering don't help, because we get distracted by the things which aggravate it. It's just as if we have an itch on our head and we scratch our leg. If it's our head that's itchy, then we're obviously not going to get much relief. In the same way, when suffering arises, we don't know how to handle it. We don't know the practice leading to the end of suffering. For instance, take this body that each of us has brought along to this meeting. If we just see the form of the body, there's no way we can escape suffering. Why not? Because we still don't see the inside of the body. We only see the outside. We only see it as something beautiful, something substantial. The Buddha said that seeing only this is not enough. We see the outside with our eyes. A child can see it. Animals can see it. It's not difficult. The outside of the body is easily seen. But having seen it, we stick to it. We don't know the truth of it. Having seen it, we grab onto it and it bites us. So we should investigate the body within the body. Whatever is in the body, go ahead and look at it. If we just see the outside, it's not clear. We see hair, nails, and so on, and they are just pretty things which entice us. So the Buddha taught us to see inside the body, to see the body within the body. What is in the body? Look closely within. You will find many surprises inside, because even though they are within us, we've never seen them. Wherever we carry them with us, sitting in a car, we carry them with us, but we still don't know them at all. It's as if we visit some relatives at their house and they give us a present. We take it and put it in our bag and then leave without opening it to see what it is inside. When at last we open it, it is full of poisonous snakes. Our body is like this. If we just see the shell, we say it's fine and beautiful. We forget ourselves. We forget impermanence, suffering, and not self. If we look within this body, it's really repulsive. If we look according to reality without trying to sugar things over, we'll see that it's really pitiful and wearisome. Dispassion will arise. This feeling of disinterest is not that we feel aversion for the world or anything. It's simply our mind clearing up, our mind letting go. We see things as not substantial or dependable, but that all things are naturally established just as they are. However we want them to be, they just go their own way regardless. Whether we laugh or cry, they simply are the way they are. Things which are unstable are unstable. Things which are not beautiful are not beautiful. So the Buddha said that when we experience sights, sounds, tastes, smells, bodily feelings, or mental states, we should release them. When the ear hears sounds, let them go. When the nose smells an odor, let it go. Just leave it at the nose. When bodily feelings arise, let go of the like or dislike that follow. Let them go back to their birthplace. The same for mental states. All these things, just let them go their way. This is knowing. Whether it's happiness or unhappiness, it's all the same. This is called meditation. Meditation means to make the mind peaceful in order to let wisdom arise. This requires that we practice with body and mind in order to see and know the sense impressions of form, sound, taste, smell, touch, and mental formations. To put it briefly, it's just a matter of happiness and unhappiness. Happiness is pleasant feeling in the mind. Unhappiness is just unpleasant feeling. The Buddha taught us to separate this happiness and unhappiness from the mind. The mind is that which knows. Feeling is the characteristic of happiness or unhappiness, like or dislike. When the mind indulges in these things, we say that it clings to or takes that happiness and unhappiness to be worthy of holding. That clinging is an action of mind. That happiness or unhappiness is feeling. When we say the Buddha told us to separate the mind from the feeling, he didn't literally mean to throw them into different places. He meant that the mind must know happiness and know unhappiness. When sitting in samadhi, for example, the peace fills the mind. Happiness comes, but it doesn't reach us. Unhappiness comes, but doesn't reach us. This is how one separates the feeling from the mind. We can compare it to oil and water in a bottle. They don't combine. Even if you try to mix them, the oil remains oil and the water remains water because they are of different density. The natural state of the mind is neither happiness nor unhappiness. When feeling enters the mind, then happiness or unhappiness is born. If we have mindfulness, then we know pleasant feelings as pleasant feelings. The mind which knows will not pick it up. Happiness is there, but it's outside the mind, not buried within the mind. The mind simply knows it clearly. If we separate unhappiness from the mind, does that mean there is no suffering, that we don't experience it? Yes, we experience it, but we know mind is mind, feeling is feeling. We don't cling to that feeling or carry it around. The Buddha separated these things through knowledge. Did he have suffering? He knew the state of suffering, but he didn't cling to it. So we say that he cut suffering off. And there was happiness too, but he knew that happiness, if it's not known, is like a poison. He didn't hold it to be himself. Happiness was there through knowledge, but it didn't exist in his mind. Thus we say that he separated happiness and unhappiness from his mind. When we say that the Buddha and the enlightened ones killed defilements, it's not that they really killed them. If they had killed all defilements, then we probably wouldn't have any. They didn't kill defilements when they knew them for what they are. They let them go. Someone who's stupid will grab them, but the enlightened ones knew the defilements in their own minds as a poison, so they swept them out. They swept out the things which caused them to suffer. They didn't kill them. One who doesn't know this will see some things, such as happiness, as good, and then grab them, but the Buddha just knew them and simply brushed them away. But when feeling arises for which we indulge in it, that is, the mind carries the happiness and unhappiness around. In fact, there are two different things. The activities of mind, pleasant feelings, unpleasant feeling, and so on, are mental impressions. They are the world. If the mind knows this, it can equally do work involving happiness or unhappiness. Why? Because it knows the truth of these things. Someone who doesn't know them sees them as having different value, but one who knows sees them as equal. If you cling to happiness, it will be the birthplace of unhappiness later on, because happiness is unstable. It changes all the time. When happiness disappears, unhappiness arises. The Buddha knew that because both happiness and unhappiness are unsatisfactory, they had the same value. When happiness arose, he let it go. He had right practice, seeing that both these things have equal value and drawbacks. They come under the law of Dhamma, that is, they are unstable and unsatisfactory. Once born, they die. When he saw this, right view arose. The right way of practice became clear. No matter what sort of feeling or thinking arose in his mind, he knew it as simply the continuous play of happiness and unhappiness. He didn't cling to them. When the Buddha was newly enlightened, he gave a sermon about indulgence in pleasure and indulgence in pain. Monks, indulgence in pleasure is the loose way. Indulgence in pain is the tense way. These were the two things that disturbed his practice until the day he was enlightened, because at first he didn't let go of them. When he knew them, he let them go, and so was able to give his first sermon. So we say that a meditator should not walk the way of happiness or unhappiness, rather he should know them. Knowing the truth of suffering, he will know the cause of suffering, and the end of suffering, and the way leading to the end of suffering. And the way out of suffering is meditation itself. To put it simply, we must be mindful. Mindfulness is knowing our presence of mind. Right now, what are we thinking? What are we doing? What do we have with us right now? If we observe like this, we are aware of how we are living. Practicing like this, wisdom can arise. We consider and investigate at all times, in all postures. When a mental impression arises that we know it as such, we don't hold it to be anything substantial. It's just happiness. When unhappiness arises, we know that it's indulgence in pain. It's not the path of the meditator. This is what we call separating the mind from the feeling. If we are clever, we don't attach, we leave things be. We become the one who knows. The mind and the feeling are just like oil and water. They are in the same bottle, but they don't mix. Even if we are sick or in pain, we know the feeling is feeling, the mind is mind. We know the painful or comfortable states, but we don't identify with them. We stay only with peace, the peace beyond both comfort and pain. You should understand it like this, because there is no permanent self. There is no refuge. You must live like this, that is, without happiness and without unhappiness. You stay only with the knowing. You don't carry things around. As long as we are still unenlightened, all this may sound strange, but it doesn't matter. We just set our goal in this direction. The mind is the mind. It meets happiness and unhappiness, and we see them as merely that. There's nothing more to it. They are divided, not mixed. If they're all mixed up, then we don't know them. It's like living in a house. The house and its occupant are related, but separate. If there's a danger in our house, we are distressed because we must protect it. But if the house catches fire, we get out of it. If painful feelings arise, we get out of it, just like that house. When it's full of fire and we know it, we come running out of it. They are separate things. The house is one thing, the occupant is another. We say that we separate mind and feeling in this way, but in fact they are by nature already separate. Our realization is simply to know this natural separateness according to reality. When we say they are not separated, it's because we are clinging to them through ignorance of the truth. So the Buddha told us to meditate. This practice of meditation is very important. Merely to know with the intellect is not enough. The knowledge which arises from practice with a peaceful mind and the knowledge which comes from study are really far apart. The knowledge which comes from study is not real knowledge of our mind. The mind tries to hold on to and keep this knowledge. Why do we try to keep it? Just to lose it. And then, when it's lost, we cry. If we really know, then there's letting go, leaving things be. We know how things are and don't forget ourselves. If it happens that we are sick, we don't get lost in that. Some people think, this year I was sick the whole time, I couldn't meditate at all. These are the words of a really foolish person. Someone who's sick or dying should really be diligent in his practice. One may say he doesn't have time to meditate. He's sick, he's suffering, he doesn't trust his body, so he feels that he can't meditate. If we think like this, then things are difficult. The Buddha didn't teach like that. He said that right here is the place to meditate. When we're sick or almost dying, that's when we really know and see reality. Other people say they don't have the chance to meditate because they're too busy. Sometimes school teachers come to mind. They come to see me. They say they have many responsibilities, so there's no time to meditate. I ask them, when you're teaching, do you have time to breathe? They answer, yes. So how can you have time to breathe if the work is so hectic and confusing? Here you are, far from the Dhamma. Actually, this practice is just about the mind and feelings. It's not something that you have to run after or struggle for. Breathing continues while working. Nature takes care of the natural processes. All we have to do is try to be aware. Just to keep trying, going inwards to see clearly. Meditation is like this. If we have that presence of mind, then whatever work we do will be the very tool which enables us to know right and wrong continually. There's plenty of time to meditate. We just don't fully understand the practice. That's all. While sleeping, we breathe. While eating, we breathe, don't we? Why don't we have time to meditate? Wherever we are, we breathe. If we think like this, then our life has much more value, as much value as our breath. Wherever we are, we have the time. All kinds of thinking are mental conditions, not conditions of the body. So we need to simply have presence of mind. Then we will know right and wrong at all times. Standing, walking, sitting and lying, there's plenty of time. We just don't know how to use it properly. Please consider this. We cannot run away from feeling. We must know it. Feeling is just feeling. Happiness is just happiness. Unhappiness is just unhappiness. They are simply that. So why should we cling to them? If the mind is clever, simply hearing this is enough to enable us to separate feeling from the mind. If we investigate like this continuously, the mind will find release, but it's not escaping through ignorance. The mind lets go, but it knows. It doesn't let go through stupidity or because it doesn't want things to be the way they are. It lets go because it knows according to the truth. This is seeing nature, the reality that's all around us. When we know this, we are someone who's skilled with the mind. We are skilled with mental impressions. When we are skilled with mental impressions, we are skilled with the world. This is to be a knower of the world. The Buddha was someone who clearly knew the world with all its difficulty. He knew the troublesome, and that which was not troublesome was right there. This world is so confusing. How is it that the Buddha was able to know it? Here we should understand that the Dhamma taught by the Buddha is not beyond our ability. In all postures, we should have presence of mind and self-awareness, and when it's time to sit in meditation, we should do that. We sit in meditation to establish peacefulness and cultivate mental energy. We do it in order to play around. We don't do it in order to play around at anything special. Insight meditation is sitting in samadhi itself. At some places, they say, now we are going to sit in samadhi. After that, we'll do insight meditation. Don't divide them like this. Tranquility is the base which gives rise to wisdom. Wisdom is the fruit of tranquility. To say that now you're going to do calm meditation, later we'll do insight. You can't do that. You can only divide them in speech. Just like a knife, the blade is on one side, the back of the blade on the other. You can't divide them. If you pick up one side, you get both sides. Tranquility gives rise to wisdom like this. Morality is the father and mother of Dhamma. In the beginning, we must have morality. Morality is peace. This means that one does no wrongdoings in body or speech. When we don't do wrong, then we don't get agitated. When we don't become agitated, then peace and collectedness arise within the mind. So we say that morality, concentration, and wisdom are the path on which all the noble ones have walked to enlightenment. They are all one. Morality is concentration. Concentration is morality. Concentration is wisdom. Wisdom is concentration. It's like a mango. When it's a flower, we call it a flower. When it becomes a fruit, we call it a mango. When it ripens, we call it a ripe mango. It's all one mango, but it continually changes. The big mango grows from the small mango becomes a big one. You can call them different fruits or all one fruit. Morality, concentration, and wisdom are related like this. In the end, it's all the path that leads to enlightenment. The mango, from the moment it first appears as a flower, simply grows to ripeness. This is enough. We should see it like this. Whatever others call it doesn't matter. Once it's born, it grows to old age, and then where? We should contemplate this. Some people don't want to be old. When they get old, they become depressed. These people shouldn't eat ripe mangoes. Why do they want the mangoes to be ripe? If they're not ripe in time, we ripen them artificially, don't we? But when we become old, we are filled with regret. Some people cry. They're afraid to get old or die. If it's like this, then they shouldn't eat ripe mangoes. Better to just eat the flowers. If we can see this, then we can see the Dhamma. Everything clears up. We are at peace. Just determined to practice like that. Today, the Chief Privy Councillor and his party have come together to hear the Dhamma. You should take what I've said and contemplate it. If anything is not right, please excuse me. But for you to know whether it's right or wrong depends on your practicing and seeing for yourselves. Whatever is wrong, throw it out. If it's right, take it and use it. But actually, we practice in order to let go of both right and wrong. In the end, we just throw everything out. If it's right, throw it out. Wrong, throw it out. Usually, if it's right, we cling to rightness. If it's wrong, we hold it to be wrong, and then arguments follow. But the Dhamma is the place where there's nothing at all. And that's the end of chapter 2. So maybe tomorrow, all going well, God willing, we'll maybe have a go at chapter 3 and 4. We'll just maybe do 2 days on this one. So that was kind of interesting. That's Ajahn Chah, the great Buddhist monk, volume 1, talks on daily life practice. So we'll leave it there for today. Talk to you again soon. And in the meantime, remember, only kindness will save us. Okay? Bye-bye. Be good.